The biggest question mark on Notre Dame's entire team is even more questionable following Charles Jagusah's season-ending injury, and now the Irish offense is tasked with finding an answer at left tackle as soon as possible without any easy solutions. That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Tuesday, August 6th. And thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. And as always, this show is free and available on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. If you are watching along, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe there as well. I know I sound like a broken record saying that every time I do the show, but I promise you it helps out the show in a big, big way. So thank you to everyone who has rated the show and subscribed along the way. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day. All summer long, just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, let's get into it. Notre Dame was dealt a really tough blow over the weekend when starting left tackle Charles Jagusah suffered an injury in practice on Saturday that will sideline him for the rest of the season. It's another bit of bad news for Irish fans who are also dealing with this seemingly inevitable announcement that 4-star quarterback Deuce Knight is going to flip his commitment from Notre Dame to Auburn. But I'm going to address that later in the week because Jagusah's injury has more to do with the here and the now, and it's going to seriously impact what happens this season. So I promise I will get to the Deuce Knight recruitment. I also talked about it with recruiting insider Brian Smith at the end of last week. So if you haven't listened to that, you can go check that out. Well, let's talk about Charles Jagusah. Pete Sampson of The Athletic was the first to report the news, and then Notre Dame's PR team made it official not long after that with the following statement, quote, "During practice on Saturday, August 3rd, offensive lineman Charles Jagusah injured his shoulder, tearing his right pectoralis muscle, I think that's right, and DB/special teams player Marty Auer injured his left knee, tearing his ACL. Surgery is upcoming for both Jagusah and Auer, and both are expected to miss the 2024 season," end quote. So, first of all, best wishes go out to Jagusah and Marty Auer. That really sucks, especially happening this close to the season when you're so excited, and especially with Jagusah, his first real chance to start for the Irish for a full season, really make a dent in the program. Feel awful for both of them, and it is a massive blow to the offensive line, the Irish offense, and the team as a whole. As we know, Jagusah was slated to be the starting left tackle. He basically won the competition for this season at the end of last season when he started for the Irish in the bowl game, and there really wasn't much of a competition to begin with. When Notre Dame made the announcement that he was getting all the first-team reps, there really wasn't even a close second. It was Jagusah's job. He performed pretty well in that Sun Bowl game, and then he was the clear front-runner to be the starter going into the season. And then after spring practice, it was said and done. Charles Jagusah was going to be the starting left tackle for Notre Dame in 2024 up until he got hurt. So when I look at the injury, it's really hard for me to quantify just how big of a loss it is because we haven't really seen enough from Charles Jagusah to know exactly. There are options to replace him, and I'm going to go over all of them in today's episode, but there's really no sugarcoating it. It is a brutal blow, and when we look at how much this is going to hurt Notre Dame, all we can really do is trust with the coaches who see him every single day in practice, what they see in him and what they say about him and what their actions tell us. And we know that whatever Jagusah did in practice was good enough to basically slot him into the second most important position on the entire team. And we know that he was so much better than all the alternatives that they never even felt the need to entertain a competition. Like, despite all the questions we have about the offensive line, and I've talked about this plenty throughout the offseason, we know that the Notre Dame offensive line is to replace both tackles, Joe Alt and Blake Fisher. The left tackle job was never a question to the Notre Dame coaching staff. Marcus Freeman and the rest of the staff expressed supreme confidence in Jagusah, and the only competition going on at tackle was on the right side of the ball between Tosh Baker and Emil Wagner. Now Notre Dame is going to have to consider the alternatives at left tackle, something that they really had not considered up until this point because Charles Jagusah had such a strong hold on that position. And that is why I think it is such a big loss for this unit, for this team, is because even though we haven't really seen Charles Jagusah play a ton, the coaching staff has, and they feel a lot better about Jagusah than anyone else playing at the left tackle position. But I do believe that there is one silver lining in all of this, and that this injury happened early on in camp, so the staff has 4 weeks to figure out the best way to replace Charles Jagusah at left tackle. If you think about it, there's actually a lot of parallels with Jagusah's injury with what Notre Dame dealt with in 2021. Notre Dame had to replace 2 starting tackles that season, and they were going to start a freshman, Blake Fisher, at left tackle. Fisher started the season opener against Florida State. Then he suffered a serious injury. I believe it was the second quarter of that game. Ended up missing the rest of the regular season, came back in the bowl game. But that is kind of how we got to Joe Alt so early on in his career. Notre Dame also has to replace 2 tackles this season, and they were also planning to start a freshman. Now, granted, Charles Jagusah was a redshirt freshman as opposed to true freshman in 2021, but you see my point, right? The offensive line was already a question mark. Then they suffered a key injury at left tackle. It made matters worse, and they had to figure things out on the fly. At least Notre Dame has some time here over the course of fall camp to figure out what option is best for them when they head to College Station and play Texas A&M in the season opener. And it's 4 weeks away, but now with this injury, I bet those 4 weeks are going to fly as Notre Dame tries to figure out all the different options there and what works best. But here is the first one that I think they're going to try, and I think that this is what I like the most as of now. Now, this could change, but this is what I think Notre Dame is going to do. My first option to replace Charles Jagusah, pretty simple. Move Tosh Baker, who, as it stands, is in a position battle with Emil Wagner at right tackle. Move Tosh Baker over to left tackle. Let Emil Wagner start at right tackle. Looks like he was already going to do that anyway. And let Tosh start at left tackle, at least in the season opener. I think this is the most likely option. I believe Matt Freeman from Irish Sports Daily reported that Tosh Baker got some reps at left tackle already, so it looks like the Notre Dame coaching staff, they're already attempting this option. They're going to see what happens here. Baker trained at left tackle throughout most of his career. He was the backup to Joe Alt. He made a couple starts at the position back in 2021. Now, granted, it didn't go that well, but I don't think he was ready for that spot. He just had to come in and replace Blake Fisher when he went down. He tried his best. Really wasn't working there. Then Tosh Baker got hurt. Then the Notre Dame staff put in Joe Alt out there, and then we know what happened after that. Joe Alt ended up becoming one of the best left tackles in program history and was a top 5 pick in the most recent NFL draft. The fact that Tosh Baker is a fifth-year senior and has experience playing the position makes me the most comfortable with him playing there compared to any of the other options today. To be honest with you, I thought Tosh Baker was going to start at right tackle, at least to start the season, given his experience over Emil Wagner, but it seems like Emil Wagner beat him out over the course of spring practice and in summer. So now Tosh Baker is not going to start. But now that Jagusah is gone, I think he could slot seamlessly into that position. Again, he doesn't have to learn a new position. He's already played there. He might be a little bit rusty because he has spent most of his time playing right tackle over the course of the past 8 to 9 months, pretty much ever since the bowl game, because like I said, he was backing up all. I just think that right now, this makes the most sense, especially when Notre Dame is going to have to go to College Station, playing in a hostile environment. I would feel the most comfortable with someone who has at least done it before. Now, don't get me wrong. I have questions about Tosh Baker. He's big, and that's great to have a big guy playing left tackle, but I think that he's not as strong as you'd like him to be for 6'8", 320 plus. I don't think he moves his feet as well as you need him to at left tackle, especially going up against a really, really talented front at Texas A&M. But I think that when you consider all the alternatives, at least you have a guy out there who's done it before and will give you some sort of a safety net compared to the other guys where it might work, but it's a bigger risk. Okay, so that is the first option, and I feel like that is what Notre Dame is going to try first. I don't know if that's going to end up being what Notre Dame rolls out there against Texas A&M in the season opener, but I think this is the first shot, and I think that ultimately this is going to be what ends up happening for Notre Dame, at least in the season opener. Again, it could change over the course of the season, but I like Tosh Baker starting at left tackle, let Emil Wagner start at right tackle, and then Coogan and Spindler could continue their battle at left guard, Ashton Craig has center locked up, and Billy Strouth has right guard locked up. That's what I like today, but that's just one option. There are a couple other intriguing options that I think Notre Dame is going to consider, but they'll have to move around some key pieces to make it work. That's next on Locked On Irish. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting quite like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Okay, here's my pick for the day. And you might not like this one, but I promise. Hear me out. I like Brazil plus 26.5 against the USA in men's basketball at the Olympics. I don't feel great about picking against the home country, but 26.5 is a ton of points in the Olympics. I know Brazil isn't anywhere close to as good as the United States, but if you've been following the U.S. men's national team throughout the Olympics, they've been better than a lot of these teams, but they've also haven't really dominated in the way that you would expect because they've been kind of playing with their fruit a little bit. Now, granted, we're in the Olympics now. They really mess around in the group stage and the friendlies and all that. But I just think 26.5 is a lot of points. So I'm taking Brazil, and it's going to be a classic. Hold on to your butts game. Shout out to SVP. That's my pick for the night. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, I want to go over 3 more options for Notre Dame to replace Jagusah at left tackle because I think they all could work in theory, but they're going to have to move around some key pieces, and I don't know if I like these options compared to the first one that I talked about in segment 1. So a really popular one from the Notre Dame fan base, as well as some people in the Notre Dame media have suggested this as well, and that would be to move Emil Wagner from what we believe to be is the starting right tackle spot, move him over to left, and let Tosh Baker start at right tackle. I understand it to a degree because I think coming out of high school, Emil Wagner, he was considered a very natural left tackle given his footwork, given his agility, his athletic ability. I'm sure you've heard it before. Emil Wagner, very talented basketball player, moves well with his feet. You think, okay, if he's playing left tackle, that's a position where you have to move your feet well. You have to be able to keep up with really talented, twitchy defensive ends. And from that aspect, I get it. But here's the problem. Wagner just got comfortable at right tackle. He's basically taken all of his reps at right tackle over the course of the past year, and it seems like he's made pretty significant strides at the position, so much so that it looks like he's already locked up that starting job at the start of camp. We all thought that was going to be an ongoing position battle over the course of these next few weeks. That doesn't appear to be the case. Joe Rudolph, Mike Denbrock, the Notre Dame coaching staff, they feel most comfortable with Emil Wagner at right tackle. So I think now that he's finally gotten to that point, if you were to move him over to left tackle, a position that he has not practiced at in over a year, I just think that would be really bad for his development. And I don't think he would play the left tackle position as well as he would the right tackle spot, even though a couple years ago we thought he'd be more suited to play left tackle. That is no longer the case because of what Wagner has done over the course of the past 9 months. I understand, it's a little bit safer because you start Tosh Baker right tackle. He's been training there. Slot him in. If Emil Wagner is better than Tosh Baker, you'd want your better tackle playing the left tackle spot. I get all that. But I feel like right now, Emil Wagner needs all the reps he can possibly get at one position. Right tackle has been his position for the past 9 months. Let's keep him there. Let's keep Emil Wagner at right tackle. So that is why I don't love that option, although I do understand why some fans like that. There's another option that would involve moving someone over to left tackle. This one is a little bit interesting. Sullivan Absher. It's a name that you might not have heard all that much because he's only going to be a redshirt freshman this season. Didn't play much at all last season. A lot of people are really high on Sullivan Absher. I know that John Bryce from Football Scoop and Irish Illustrated has talked about him a lot. He's a name that continues to come up with conversations with coaches. The coaches have gone out of their way to rave about what Sullivan Absher can do. And they were so high on him, they actually moved Absher from tackle to guard because they thought he had a realistic shot at competing with Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler to start at left guard. That's really high praise, especially when you consider the fact that Coogan started 13 games at guard last season and Rocco Spindler started 10 games last season. The fact that the staff believes that he is already good enough to compete with those guys at guard is really telling. It shows you that they think really highly of Sullivan Absher. So would they be willing to then move him back to left tackle? I think it's certainly a possibility, but I do think in a similar way to Wagner, you would kind of stunt his development now because you're, forcing this move on him at a time that's really not optimal. But again, none of this is ideal for Notre Dame. They're going to have to do something that they don't want to do because Charles Jagusah got hurt. I like this idea of moving Sullivan Absher left tackle if he is as good as we think he could be based on what the coaching staff has said and some of the actions like moving him over. Absher is 6'7", 321 pounds. He certainly has the size to play left tackle, but would the coaching staff feel comfortable with trotting him out there against Texas A&M in the season opener? Again, redshirt freshman, little to no playing experience. That is asking a lot of a guy, especially when you just moved him over and he's probably been training at the guard spot for the last few months. So he would have to shake off some rust and then go back out to a position that he has never started at in college. So it's intriguing. I don't love it, but I think that they're going to try this. And if Sullivan Absher is as good as they say say that he is, don't be surprised if Sullivan Absher ends up getting that spot. Okay, another option that Notre Dame could tinker with, and this would be really surprising, but I think that if you're looking to get the 5 best offensive linemen on the field, just based purely on talent, this would be the best move. That would be to move Billy Schrauth from right guard all the way over to left tackle. And then by doing that, you could pick, either Pat Coogan or Rocco Spindler. One of them starts at left guard and the other starts at right guard. That would pretty much end that competition at guard. Or maybe Sullivan Absher, if they want to keep him at guard, maybe he beats out one of them. Either way, you're getting Coogan and Spindler and Absher, 3 guys who you feel very confident in. They have a better shot now. They're playing at guard, Ashton Craig at center, Wagner at right tackle. You don't have to mess with that. But now you've got Billy Schrauth at left tackle. The staff is extremely high on Billy Schrauth. Marcus Freeman has said that of all the players on the team, Schrauth has a great chance to break out this season. In the same way that there was no position battle at left tackle with Jagusah, there was no position battle at right guard. Billy Schrauth had that locked up, secured, ready to go at the start of camp. So it really just had to do with Coogan and Spindler. So on one hand, it's great that the coaching staff feels so much confidence in him, but that would be asking a lot of Billy Schrauth to all of a sudden move over to left tackle, a position that he is probably not trained at since he was in high school. Usually when you're in high school, the best offensive linemen play left tackle. That's just the way it works. I know that when Quentin Nelson started at Notre Dame, he was pretty reluctant to play the guard spot, or at least his family did not love the idea of Quentin Nelson playing guard because they felt he was more suited to play tackle. Then he ended up being one of the best guards in college football and one of the best guards in the NFL. So that is sort of the same type of development that they saw for Billy Schrauth. And it's been working so far, right? He's going to be the starting right guard. Would they be willing to abandon that and have him go over to left tackle with just 4 weeks to prepare? Again, he has not trained at this position in literal years. Would they be willing to do that? I don't think they would. But it's intriguing because you get Schrauth on the field, and then you'd have Schrauth, Coogan, Spindler, Craig, Wagner. That's a really solid unit, but I think Schrauth would be far less effective by playing left tackle with so much little time to prepare for this season than he would be if you just kept him at right guard, kept him at what is now his natural position, one that he's become really good at, and just let him thrive. Because again, when Marcus Freeman said he has a chance to break out this season, it was at right guard. It was not at left tackle. So I think it's something that maybe Notre Dame would experiment with, but ultimately I don't think that's the way to go because Billy Schrauth is just a natural right guard at this point, and I think he's much better suited. You can figure out left tackle in another way. Okay, coming up next, could Notre Dame be willing to start a true freshman at left tackle in their season opener? They've done it before and ended up changing the future of the entire offensive line. More on that right after this. Today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know I care a lot about my car. Probably too much considering it's not even that nice. It's a 2012 Ford Escape. But still, I was dealing with a headlight issue recently. I didn't really like what I was hearing from the local mechanics and went on eBay Motors. They hooked it up and they will hook you up as well. So keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Okay, the fifth and final option that I think Notre Dame is going to consider at left tackle is basically two options, but either way, it involves starting a true freshman at that spot, and they would just keep the right tackle the same, keep everything else on the offensive line the same. They would start either Anthony Knapp or Gerby Lambert at left tackle. And I think a lot of you might be surprised that I said Anthony Knapp before Gerby Lambert. If you recall, Anthony Knapp was a low 4-star recruit in this most recent class. He is a true freshman, came in with Gerby Lambert, but the big difference there is Anthony Knapp was an early enrollee. He's been with the team since January, whereas Gerby Lambert, the higher rated of the two, the much higher rated, Gerby Lambert was a borderline 5-star in this most recent recruiting class. He did not join the team until this summer, and I think that is very important. Anthony Knapp was a big surprise during spring practice, so much so that he has actually been getting the backup left tackle reps in fall camp prior to Charles Jagusah getting hurt. So that doesn't mean that he was necessarily the backup in a game situation, but when they ran the twos out there, Anthony Knapp was the left tackle. A lot of people immediately assumed that Gerby Lambert would step on campus and be a force to be reckoned with. And physically, he is. I mean, he is a very imposing dude, 6'8", 330 plus pounds, basically. He looks like a future NFL offensive lineman, but he's only been in college just a couple months. And based on some of the intel I've heard from people in and around the team, Gerby Lambert is a long way to go in his development. Totally fine. That was expected, right? I don't think most people were really expecting Gerby Lambert to play. I mean, some fans were, but I think they just got, blinded by the recruiting ranking and the size and all that. And look, I get it. He's huge, and he's going to be very, very good. But I think that he has a lot that he needs to get better at before Notre Dame is going to trust him out there, especially at left tackle, such an important position. He needs to get stronger, and he also needs to move his feet a little bit better. Anthony Knapp, despite the fact that he was not as highly recruited as Lambert was out of high school, he played at a much better high school program and faced much tougher competition than Gerby Lambert. So it is possible that the transition from college or from high school to college is much easier for Anthony Knapp than it is for Gerby Lambert. So the floor for this season between the two of them could be higher with Anthony Knapp, even though we all agree that the ceiling is higher for Gerby Lambert as opposed to Anthony Knapp. Anthony Knapp played at Roswell High School in Georgia, whereas Gerby Lambert was playing high school football in Massachusetts. Not really a high school football hotbed, and Gerby Lambert was so big and so dominant that he would just barrel over dudes, right? It's not going to be the same in college, and I think that's why it's got Gerby Lambert needs a little bit more time to develop as opposed to Knapp. Again, I don't think Notre Dame would opt for either of these options. I think that all the ones I presented earlier are what they're going to try first. They're probably better, but it's something that they're going to have to consider. Like, they weren't just putting Anthony Knapp out there with the twos at left tackle for the hell of it. Like, he's obviously done something in practice and in the weight room and everything he's done over the summer to show those coaches, hey, he's further along than they probably anticipated at this point in time in his career. So it's something that they might consider. Again, I think it's going to be the last one, but either way, it's not ideal. And when you consider all of these options, like, even though I can make the case for Tosh Baker, I can make the case for Selvin Absher, I don't love any of these options, and that is why this is such a brutal blow for the Notre Dame offensive line. As anyone who has listened to me at all throughout this offseason, you know that my biggest question mark going into the season was all about the offensive line, so much so that I thought it could really derail the entire season because I have those memories from 2021, especially during like the first half of the season when the offensive line could not block a soul. It was really, really difficult for them to move the ball. And that team had Kyron Williams coming off a huge season. They had Kevin Austin at wide receiver, Jack Cohn, a good quarterback, and they still could not move the ball because the offensive line and particularly the tackles were so bad. So I didn't feel great about the offensive line going into the season. I feel even worse about them now following the loss of Jagusah, and I feel even more nervous about the Texas A&M game specifically than before because I do think, and I've always felt like, as the season goes along, Joe Rudolph, Mike Denbrock, the Notre Dame offensive staff, they're smart enough to figure out a way to get this offensive line working so they're at least like above average. They're not like a debilitating part of the team. But now that I look at this group and I realize that they're going to have to start someone at left tackle who they do not want to start there, and it is such an important position that I feel really, really nervous about this team and what it could do to the season. Notre Dame still has a loaded roster. They have one of the best defenses in the country. They are much more improved at the skill position, specifically the wide receiver. Like, there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic about the Irish this season. I'm not saying that the sky is falling and anything like that, but I think when I look at this Jagusah injury and the real impact it could have on the season outlook, like, this could be the difference between winning and losing one of those key games in the schedule, whether it be Texas A&M, Louisville, Florida State. We might look back in the end of the season like, man, it would have been really nice to have Charles Jagusah in that game. What was a loss could have been a win if Notre Dame had their real starting tackle. And that's just the way it is. Like, that would be the case for literally every single team in college football because the left tackle position is just so important. You need to have a really good player at that position to succeed. You need him to protect your quarterback. And now Notre Dame is going to have to figure out an answer at that position that they really did not want to do. And also something you have to consider is this might not be the only injury that happens on the offensive line. We still have 4 more weeks of camp left. And that's another thing that worries me because they already did not have much depth to begin with. Now that depth is already being tested so early on in the season. And look, man, it's football. Injuries happen all the time. I saw some people like questioning Freeman or Lauren Landau over this. Like, dude, they have to be a little physical in practice. He just got tied up. Injuries happen. It sucks. It's really unfortunate. It's really bad luck. This is also the second serious injury that Charles Jagusah has had to face in his career. I believe he had a torn PCL in high school. He had to have surgery. It really slowed down his development at the beginning of his freshman year. Then he finally figured it out. It was healthy and ready to go. And he was showing all the signs and all the potential that he had when he was being recruited out of high school. Some sites had him as a 5-star. Like, it was all coming together for him. And he was going to have a great chance to make his mark on the team this season. And unfortunately for him and for the Notre Dame team, that's not going to happen. I think that this is going to have long-lasting effects looking beyond this season. Could impact Charles Jagusah's whole career. Again, that is probably a conversation for another day, but this is a very, very tough blow to the offensive line, and it's something that, look, it's not going to be pretty early on in the season. Like, I think even the most optimistic Irish fans out there realize that, hey, it's going to be a real struggle on the offensive line, particularly going up against Texas A&M. They have one of the best defensive ends in the country, the transfer from Purdue, and it's going to be a really tough task. One thing is for sure, we know this about Mike Elko, he's going to be sending everything at those tackles in that first game, and the Notre Dame staff is just going to have to figure it out. The offensive line is going to have to come together. I think you're going to see a lot, and I mean a lot of RPO early on because Riley Leonard has experience doing it. Mike Denbrock has experience calling it, and it's one way to sort of get the edge on the defense, even if your tackles and your offensive line isn't really what you'd like it to be, because at least in that situation, you can take advantage of different matchups that come your way. But again, Notre Dame has recruited the offensive line really well in recent years. They have talent on the offensive line. That has been true throughout this whole process, throughout this whole offseason. One thing that I've kept coming back to with the offensive line is they've got talent there. They've got different options. They could move Tosh Baker with experience. They could move Sullivan Absher. They could start one of the true freshmen. None of it is ideal, but we do know that these guys are promising players. And when Notre Dame put Joe Alt in there at left tackle a few years ago, I don't think anyone was like, oh, well, now the problem is going to be fixed. We're putting in this true freshman left tackle who was playing tight end for his high school just a few months ago. And then Joe Alt ended up stabilizing the position and then ended up becoming a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. So it's not great right now. There are some reasons to be optimistic, and this is a great opportunity for one of these guys to shine. A guy like Tosh Baker has been passed up many times throughout his career. Maybe he finally figures it out this season. This was just the opportunity he needed. Maybe the younger guys like Absher or Knapp or Lambert or Billy Shroud makes that move over to left tackle, figures it out, and his whole career changes. This is what happens. This is life. This is football. Notre Dame is going to have to figure out. They've got options to do it, but it's not looking great right now, but we'll see what happens because, again, we still have 4 more weeks to go before the start of the season, and I still am very excited despite the tough news on the injury front. But that's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your very first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin. He's the host. He does a great job covering the sport as a whole. I've been on his show a few times already. I was actually just talking to Spencer recently. I plan on joining him again soon. So be on the lookout for that. Also, remember to subscribe to the show on YouTube and wherever you're listening to podcasts. You can also give us a follow on social media. I'm taking mailbag questions. I'm going to do that at the end of the week. You could send them in on X at Locked On Irish or send them in on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. Also, follow my personal X account at Tyler, WOJCIAK. I'll see you guys tomorrow.